getting us all together here. All right, and hopefully everybody can see me. My PowerPoint here now is my background, but as I mentioned, kind of going through this process, and I maybe should have worn a different color sweater here, but going through the process and really kind of from the very beginning, what financial aid is and the idea that it's these funds that are there to really cover anything in terms of post-secondary college expenses, and they really come from a variety of different sources as we put these packages together. The ability for students to receive all this comes down to a couple of steps that we'll discuss throughout the presentation, but we're going to talk about most of these in terms of the federal government, the state of Maryland, the colleges and universities, and what they have to offer, private sources and what students can do to find those private sources. And then, of course, the last one that we won't talk about much other than now is that idea of employer benefits. You may have, as a parent, student that has a job may have some employer benefits where the employer can either assist in covering some of that college tuition or repayment to different things. And so really being able to go through and have those sources really going to be up to you, the parent of the student, to find your HR office and meet with them and see what is available and what's out there. I will mention any questions that come up kind of throughout the presentation, throw them in the chat. I'll try to keep up with them as best as I can throughout the presentation, but certainly there's a couple of kind of stopping points with sections that we can come to and answer those questions that do come up as we work through this. So really, the first step in applying for financial aid really begins with getting your FSA ID. Those of you who are parents who may have done this before, you can use your FSA ID again. It works for you. It's tied to your social security number. For the students, it is important that they get this and they can go ahead and do this part now. The kind of change this year you'll see a little bit. It may be that multiple parents in the household will need an FSA ID, and we'll touch on that. But definitely one parent in the household and the student that will be filing the FAFSA. And really think of it as the student's financial aid application for aid with parent information included in that process. This is kind of what you're going to look at, studentaid.gov, that link that you saw there on that previous slide. Complete the FAFSA form. It's going to be able to take you to that spot to either go into the FAFSA form itself, the free application for federal student aid, or to get into create your FSA ID to kind of begin this entire process. The free application for federal student aid or FAFSA form typically is open October 1st. Some of you may have heard of some of the changes. Laws were passed in 19 and 20 that changed kind of how this whole process will function. It is not open yet for those of you who are seniors. We anticipate, they've told us sometime in December it will be open. They have not given us a date yet. We're still waiting on an exact date. I anticipate the holiday break time is when it will become available. So I'm not banking anything prior to January 1st, in a kind of all honesty. And so definitely keep an eye out. I know the Department of Ed, colleges, universities will be sending out information letting you know that it is open, it's ready, and available for you to start submitting and filling out and submitting that information. It is required for all federal student aid programs. It is required for most institutional and state programs as well. So this is going to be one of the most important pieces to this college search process, is having this form submitted to the different colleges, universities that's out there. It's a standard federal form, so it's going to collect the same information for most everybody. It does have some skip logic built in. They've kind of streamlined the process and made it hopefully much easier, simpler, faster for families and students to submit the information. The idea of having it in, so the question popped in about an advantage to filing the FAFSA earlier than later. Always earlier than later. There are deadlines for programs that we'll talk about, but going through the process, get it done as soon as you can. It is one of those, like I said, always better earlier than later throughout this entire process. The FAFSA form itself, once you get all that information in there, will basically spit out a number. That is the student aid index. It determines eligibility for specific aid programs from both college and universities, as well as the federal programs, state programs. It determines eligibility for all of those. One of the big changes this year is the data retrieval through the IRS. And so that asterisk that was there on the FSA ID slide, basically moving forward, this process has to take place in order for you to be able to file the FAFSA. Because as you can see here, divorced or separated parents, in this case of multiple filers for taxes. So in a single household, if you have parents filing separately, each one of them will have to consent to using this IRS data retrieval process to submit and fill out all of the information now. As for divorced and separated parents, one of the changes they've made again for this coming academic year, for this FAFSA year, is that it is the parent that supplies the most financial support for the student is now the parent of record. It is no longer where the student lived or who they lived with the most throughout the year. It is specifically financial support. The ability to go in and make adjustments to that is kind of stripped away as well. So once you complete that IRS data information, it will tell you that it is done and completed properly, but you won't see that information once it's in there. I will say one of the things that I've learned recently, now that we're getting a bit more information about the process, is that it is a step-by-step process. Students will begin this process, they'll fill out their section and then pass it off to the parents to submit their information for the FAFSA form. There was some concern about in other groups about students seeing specific financial information. That is in most cases not going to be the case now, because that student, like I said, will begin the process, pass it off to the parent to kind of complete and submit. Another big change for those of you who may have done this before is it will still ask the questions of how many folks are in the household and how many folks will be in college. Dependents will be in college. That is no longer going to be a part of the FAFSA calculation formula. There is no what has been kind of dubbed a multi-student discount, so to speak. The ability for you to go in, send it to specific schools. We'll talk about a process where we can account for some of that a little bit later. But the that kind of discount for having more than one in college is going away to a point. There is an additional supplement that can be filed to private institutions called the CSS profile. It accounts for a bit more information and is used only specifically for institutional aid eligibility. And so only for those schools that take this, this is only determining what students are eligible to receive as like institutional grant money. The bulk of this information is going to be financial. They do allow for some additional information to be included throughout this process, but if you are submitting to any of the private institutions, they will let you know they need this information. Definitely check their website. You can check College Board's website to get the information as well. But they did institute a waiver for families. You can see there with an SAT waiver for students or the family AGI less than $100,000. It is now free for those families to submit this additional form. Otherwise, they will charge you for submission of the CSS profile. And I did see a couple of questions pop in. Yeah, you can get the FSA ID now. The FAFSA is not open yet. It will be open soon. In subsequent years, it will be open October 1st. So important to kind of stay on top of that for the subsequent years. With more than one in college, it's gonna get a little different in terms of those calculations. The parent listed on the FAFSA, the parent of record, the only parent that will be on the FAFSA is the parent that supplies the most financial support, to the question that popped in. In the case of divorced or separated parents, the non kind of custodial parent, so to speak, or the parent that is not the parent of record, their information is not included on the FAFSA. It is just that one household that is included. I will say that if that biological parent is remarried and there is a step parent in the household, then that step parent for the parent of record will be included on this in terms of their financial information as well. This is where that multiple FSA ID information may come into play. If you file separate taxes for whatever reason, they'll have to consent to have that information sent over as well. Joint custody families, so that's going to be up to you to figure out who supports financially the student the most. If it is through where they live, and the biggest kind of I guess concern by most families is the idea of child support. Does that child support coming in offset other things that may be covered? Whose health insurance are they on? Whose car insurance are they on? Who buys the groceries? I mean, you can really get very, very granular with that decision. So it will be up to families to determine who provides the majority of that financial support for the student. The CSS profile will only need to be completed for those institutions. They may have a separate deadline, so it's going to be up to the students to kind of have all that figured out. When do things need to be in? So it's going to be really important moving forward to know when applications are due, when FAFSA may be required if they have a deadline for that, if there is a CSS profile deadline. But again, that is open now, so you can begin that process while we kind of wait for the FAFSA to become available. But again, the FAFSA will be, in most cases, required for all programs. The CSS profile will be a supplement to that at those particular institutions. There are a handful of those. Like I said, there are 3 here in Maryland still, and they are all private institutions. You can always go into the FAFSA and make corrections. It's not a one and done type form. So at any point, the question came in about removing a parent or changing information. The ability to go in and make those corrections, it will be something new every year. And so even if it was a certain way in a prior submission and it changes for the next year, it will be that new information going forward. But you can always go in and make corrections for something that may be incorrect, make adjustments or something that may need to be adjusted. You can always go back in and it's never kind of a one and done thing, because we know obviously things do change. So in terms of colleges, universities, what we're doing with all of this, it's important to understand that the student aid index that I mentioned is something that is going to be the determinant for eligibility for all of the different programs. And this is specifically calculated by the FAFSA form and all the information included within this piece. But it's really important to understand that this is yours. It's going to stay the same regardless of where you apply, where you're admitted, where you decide to attend. And so understanding that, I think, is kind of this first step in how all of these pieces fit together, because the SII is coming out of this new calculation, and it really does come down to your income, your tax information, and some of the untaxed information that may be there as well as assets. So unfortunately, those savings plans are going to be included. Those 529s are going to be included in the asset calculation for families for any of the 529s they own within the household. The good news is there's kind of a third-party loophole with 529s. If a grandparent or someone has a 529 on behalf of the student that is not included here, it will be something that is included on the CSS profile. Like I said, that CSS takes into a bit more information in terms of how you're going to be paying for college and what you have at your disposal. But for the process of the FAFSA form, only those within the dependent household are going to be calculated for or submitted for the calculation. Yeah, always apply for the FAFSA. The question popped in about, should you apply even if you don't think you'll receive any money? The answer is always yes. And that is from an admissions kind of my admissions hat. That's also from my financial aid hat side. The FAFSA form does nothing but open doors for financial programs. There are some non-need based programs that require a FAFSA to be on file. And if you don't have it, then you certainly won't be eligible for those specific programs. But my answer is always yes, file the FAFSA, at least for the first year. And if it comes down that you don't qualify for anything in terms of additional gift aid to cover those costs, you know you've done it, you know what's available, and you know what's out there. For the subsequent years, you can certainly make that choice to forego the FAFSA. But in short, yes, file the FAFSA, even if you think you're not going to be eligible. Do it anyway, at least that first year. Yeah, 20 schools, that's pretty great. I mean, if you're applying to 20 schools, personally, I think maybe narrow the list down just a little bit, but you can, in one submission, submit to up to 20 different institutions. Obviously, that's going to be the first year, and then moving forward, will only need to submit to that one that you'll be returning to as a student. But when using all of this information, it really comes down to a couple of factors. And so the first being the cost of attendance. So you can see it's made up of two very distinct parts. The direct costs are the tuition fees, housing, meals, things that we know it's going to cost you to be a student there, because those are the things that we're going to charge you to be a student at the institution. This is not a comprehensive list. There are programs that may include other pieces to this. But the other side of the coin are those indirect costs, things that we know it will cost you to be a student, but we're not going to charge you for, that you will not see as a part of the student bill. So books, supplies, transportation, personal expenses. This added together comes down to the full cost of attendance, which means in most cases, that cost of attendance, or all cases, that cost of attendance will be greater than what you'll be billed for a semester or for a year or a term or whatever it may be. The idea of this cost of attendance is to allow us to build in these indirect costs to allow a student to receive a stipend throughout their time, so they don't have to come out of pocket initially for these indirect costs throughout the school year. That is an important to understand, because this idea of financial need really comes down to a very simple calculation. The cost of attendance of an institution, subtracting out the student aid index that comes out of the FAFSA. As I mentioned, that is yours. It's not going to change. Gives us your demonstrated financial need. The kicker here is the cost of attendance will differ from school to school, and sometimes within program to program within the same institution. Your financial need will be different everywhere. Your financial need is a determinant of eligibility for specific programs. So your packages will look different depending on the institution based off of this calculation. So it's important to understand that at one institution, you may have financial need, and at another, you may have none. So your packages will look significantly different based off of that that calculation. For instance, University of Chicago is $85,000 a year. That's a lot. Your SIA would have to be pretty high to have no financial need at a school like that. On the other hand, at a place like St. Mary's College in Maryland, your cost of attendance is going to be about 30. So your SIA can be, significantly lower, would have to be significantly lower to have a financial need at an institution like St. Mary's. And so looking at those different pieces, it will be, like I said, determining the eligibility and what we can put into a financial aid package for a student based on this very simple calculation. Because there are specific categories of aid. There's need-based aid and there's non-need-based aid. Obviously, to be eligible for need-based aid, you have to have financial need. The non-need based aid, that's going to come down to kind of the scholarship pieces, something that institutions are going to give to students based off of some sort of merit or recognition as you go through and put these kind of pieces together. The gift aid obviously are those pieces that everyone wants: grants and scholarships, free money to pay for college, cover those expenses. But the other types of aid, they're based off of students' eligibility for need and non-need based aid, are those self-help programs, those loan programs they would pay back later. And of course, those work study programs where students would earn funds through working on or off campus to cover some of those indirect costs in most cases. They certainly can use this to put towards their bill and pay for some of those direct costs as well, but totally up to them, as they would receive a paycheck as they would any sort of employment. So the 529s, as they're used, the question being, what happens the following year when 529 is depleted? The SAI, yeah, so it's going to be done every single year. And so all the information in terms of finances is as of the day that you are filing the FAFSA, how much is in these specific accounts. So it's a checking and savings, the 529 asset accounts. So it definitely will change the SAI from year to year because you are using those funds. Early decision, that's a great question. It can impact aid. There are some institutions that will package students differently because, well, they're early decision candidate. We know we've got them. They're going to be coming. We can kind of pull back on some aid programs for those students. I will say that at St. Mary's, just, you know, a little plug, as I mentioned, that will be sporadic throughout the presentation. We don't do that. We package every student the same, regardless of kind of their application program. To the other side of that early decision, if you apply later, if you file the FAFSA later, there may be fewer programs available because money has been spent or allocated elsewhere. And so definitely, again, getting those forms and things in on time and being sure that you have everything in place for the different colleges and universities that you plan on attending. And Jeremy, thank you very much. Just put the link in there for the CSS profile and which schools require that for institutional aid programs. So it is there in the chat for you to take a look. But it looks like it's down for maintenance, but be able to look at it a bit later. And working through, so you have the FAFSA form, you have the CSS profile, you have all your documents submitted and everything's good to go. We're going to start putting this package together. Where does it all come from? And really those 4 sources that we talked about earlier, and where, you know, all this aid is coming from, starting with the institutions, the colleges, universities. We are awarding scholarships and thinking of scholarships as that non-need based pot for students in recognition of something, of an achievement, of athletics, academics, arts, leadership, whatever the institution wants to focus on, to kind of give credit where credit is due for the achievements of those students throughout their academic careers thus far. And then those grants being that kind of need-based category of aid for covering the cost of the education to make it as affordable and accessible as possible for students based off of that financial need standing. And so, you know, the SAR, or the CSS profile calculations that institutions have, definitely finding as much gift aid for those students as we can moving forward. In terms of state funding, the state of Maryland has a lot of great programs, everything from need-based programs to merit-based programs to occupational programs to special populations. The ability for you to be eligible for these lies kind of in 2 very distinct places. One, the FAFSA has to be submitted prior to the March 1 deadline. That means not hitting the button February 28th, but submitted and accepted by the Department of Education and available for the Maryland Higher Education Commission to get that information from the DOE. The key to these different programs is kind of that eligibility and standing within the state of Maryland. One that is kind of wide open for students. You see those are the legislative scholarships. MDelect.net will tell you who your senators and delegates are in the state of Maryland based off your home address, and giving you their contact information to reach out to them for the scholarship applications they may have. The state of Maryland has a lot of need-based programs. As I mentioned, if anyone wants to be a teacher, they have the teaching fellowship. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's a teacher grant. I want to say fellowship is in there somewhere, but it allows the state of Maryland to cover up to 100% of the tuition for a certified teaching program. So it does come with some kind of red tape there at the end. You do have to teach in the state of Maryland for a particular amount of time based on the number of years you receive that in undergrad and graduate studies, but certainly a lot of different programs out there to take a look at to be sure you have all those options that are out there and know what they are to be able to apply for some of those as well. And the federal programs. Again, FAFSA has to be on file to be eligible for any of these programs. The grants they have out there, again, another teacher-based program. Low-income students that are of low income have these Pell Grant, Student Education Opportunities grants that are out there. Students will be eligible to receive. And then the Federal Work-Study Program. Again, finding work on and off campus. The federal government subsidizes institutions to be able to offer additional aid through this work-study program to students to help cover some of those payroll costs. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the federal loan programs. But, the federal Department of Education is the largest supplier of financial aid to students. One of the greatest things you can do is just have the FAFSA on file, be eligible for everything that's out there. Like I said, at least for that first year, to be sure you have all those doors open for you. And then any outside and private resources. Montgomery County Public Schools has a great resource as well, but going out and finding those outside scholarships, it's really going to be up to the student to go out and hustle, find that money, find where it is, be able to go out and figure out the eligibility for specific programs if they qualify, and then getting those scholarship applications out there to those different entities. Almost every private public organization, company, whatever it may be, they all have scholarships out there. And Kate just threw one in the chat there for you. But going out and finding those scholarships, like I said, think of it as a summer job. If a student can come out with $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $8,000, whatever it may be, it's a pretty good summer job to go towards those educational expenses as well. So I mentioned loans, the federal student loan programs, the Stafford loans you can see there. And then to the other side are the private source loans through the local banks, credit unions, private loan servicers. I always recommend the Stafford loan programs first. You'll be hard set to find private loans with the same terms, interest rates, those sorts of things that are out there. The students do have options, or they have kind of eligibility distinctions between the subsidized and unsubsidized loans that we'll talk about. But you can see the Parent Plus loan that's there is a federal backed loan as well. It's available to parents of dependent students to help cover the gap between what they have in terms of their financial aid and the cost of attendance. And so that is an additional application that parents can take on some of that, covering some of that cost as well from year to year. But again, the Stafford loan program should always be that first look. Those private sources are certainly there for families and students to use. And there are some resources like we have on our website to give you some insight into what's out there, what's available, what the rates look like, but that will come with a bit deeper application process throughout those private loans as well. So I mentioned that breakdown between the subsidized and unsubsidized loan through the Stafford loan programs. To be eligible for the subsidized loan, we talked about that idea of financial need. You have to have financial need to be eligible for the subsidized student loan. And the key to that is it defers that interest while the student is enrolled at least half time in school. While every student is eligible for the direct unsubsidized student loan, the interest does accrue on that while a student is enrolled. And so again, always recommend, if they can, a few dollars a month to kind of bury that interest or pay that off as quickly as possible to keep that principal from snowballing with that interest while they're enrolled in school. Both come with the same deferment period, that's 6 months after graduating or finishing a program. The idea being get the students on their feet, start making some money, and then be ready to repay on those student loans moving forward. Great. A couple of questions did come in. The FAFSA is open for the entire academic year. It's open for about 18 months typically. The typical October opening for the FAFSA, it will be open throughout the academic year at the institution. And so you, in most cases, will be able to file at any point between October and then May the following year and a half. So if it were to open now, it won't close for 24-25 school year until May of 2025. So it's 18 to 20 months it's available. Again, always recommend doing it earlier than later. The FAFSA is only for students who will be graduating and going on to higher education. So if you're a junior, you're not graduating early, nothing for you to do just yet. The ability for you to go through and kind of get all of your ducks in a row and then be ready when that opens up for your senior year to start submitting the application. One question did come in about seeing the FAFSA information effect on the decision to offer non-need-based scholarships. In some cases, I would say in the vast majority of cases, the answer to that is no. Most public institutions and I would say most private institutions as well function on a need-blind application system. Application review process, excuse me, in which case they don't have that financial information to make those decisions. In terms of scholarships, in a lot of cases, those will be advertised, what a student will be eligible to receive kind of outright. The need-based programs will vary, obviously, based off of the information that's there. I will say that need-aware institutions, typically private schools, may take into account that financial information on whether they would offer admission or not. In many cases, those are the colleges, universities that have a no loan program where they guarantee that students will have no loans while they're there. Well, in order to cover those costs, and give students enough money to cover and not take out any loans, they're going to make some admissions decisions based off of that financial information. But I will say to your specific question, the answer is no. Those non-need-based scholarships should not be impacted by the financial aid information moving forward. Question about if ED or RD, the amount of aid, or if a student be penalized for ED, simply ask. I mean, I would hope and would assume that those admissions counselors would be open and honest with you, but that will be something that they would be able to give a pretty straightforward answer if packages are different for ED or RD or even early action students as you're moving through that application process. Question came in about CSS profile and do we need the child's College Board account, or does a parent need to create an account? Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with that. I don't know if a parent, and Kate, you may be able to help me here, if a parent needs to have a College Board account as well.
So I'm sorry, somebody was texting me. What was the question
No
again?
worries. About submitting the CSS profile. If the student only needs an account, or if the parent will have to have one as well.
I think only the student needs it for CSS.
Okay. Yeah. Well, a single login. It's not as the form itself is not as restrictive, and so like the FAFSA form is going to be that handoff process, but and the data retrieval, which the CSS profile does not have access to, so it should be a little bit easier to get into and submit. Thank you, Kate.
Is it 2020? It's 2021 tax returns they're going to be using, right? Or am I a year off?
So moving forward, so it'll be the 24-25 year, so it'll be 2022 taxes.
Oh, 22. Okay. I was
Correct.
a year off. Yes, thank you. That's right.
Yes, so they use a process called prior year, and so
Right.
they use that 2022 information based off the year of enrollment.
Thank you.
Right. Let's see. The extended the May 1 deadline. I don't believe so. With the FAFSA coming out, in most cases, large universities like College Park will do a mass release in March anyway. I think that will stay very much the same for schools like them. We will have ours out as soon as we possibly can. Once we're able to load the information, get things sorted, and get things together. I anticipate by the first week in February that we'll have those packages out to students that have applied early decision, early action. But I think, yeah, the May 1 deadline, again, if you're still waiting on information, it can certainly, you can always ask to see what their process or what their policy is on extended deadlines for getting that information. For instance, early decision students, if for us at St. Mary's, if those students apply early decision, but finances are going to be a real sticking point, we will extend that deadline for them to be able to pay that deposit a little bit later when they have all that information. Yeah, so that's a great question, Terry. One of the things we'll talk about is how you can account for some of that, for the way things have changed. The ability for you to go through and look at it if there was a change in circumstance or income. We'll definitely touch on that as well. Yeah, if the 2022 taxes have not been filed yet, you won't unfortunately be able to file the FAFSA until that is completed and submitted. I think was it last weekend, the deadline for extensions was last
So.
the end of
Yeah,
last week.
So.
Once the taxes are done, then you have that access to the IRS data retrieval, to data exchange, excuse me, they changed the name on us. But once you have that done, you'll be able to get into the 2022 information into the FAFSA. And unfortunately, without being able to do that, you're not able to file the FAFSA unlike previous years.
I just want to step in here for a
Sure.
minute. So I just want to let you know that we know that this is confusing. We're confused. Well, maybe Rob's not confused, but I'm confused until I actually see the FAFSA. Something was sent to me today, which I haven't had a chance to review. That's a preview of the FAFSA. And once I've looked through that, if that's information that I think I can share with all of you, I will be sending that out through Naviance. But I just want to let you know that all 25 high schools in Montgomery County, all of us are required to continue to provide trainings throughout the fall and throughout the spring, as we roll out this FAFSA. But Rob will be available. Montgomery College has something, well, they've changed the name. It used to be called FAFSA Fever, but they're going to be doing a lot of trainings. They have a helpline, so that if you start to do it and you're confused, there are going to be resources, plenty of resources for all of you to get your questions answered.
Absolutely. And the Department of Ed has been very helpful too, with their kind of help site and what should be included and what should be included and how to get the information and where it should be located. And so the process itself, the simplification, the ease of the application has certainly gotten better. One of the big changes about 5 years ago, I guess I was a little bit longer than that, but was taking an idea of the student aid process, from a government slog and making families get through all this information, into a much more user-friendly process. They actually hired the guy that used to work for MasterCard to really turn this into a customer-centric process to make things better, more enjoyable, easier, and really put everything in one place. There used to be separate websites the Department of Ed had, one for the FAFSA, one for the loan information, one for the master promissory notes and entrance counseling for the student loans. And so putting it all into one place has definitely made that a lot easier, and getting this information. I will say we're now seeing where politics is starting to rear its ugly head into the process a little bit more, through how things were changed, information that was cut out of the FAFSA, what's being included and what's not. So the process should be much easier, but we'll certainly see how it all goes. Yeah, and Kate, the thing that dropped today was the kind of the beta test for us to be able to get into the FAFSA form. I printed off the paper form a while back. It looks the same. They say there are fewer questions. I think they grouped the questions in a particular way, so there are the same number of actual questions. But certainly, that demographic information is going to be pretty easy to get that information in there. Yeah, so if you just came to the state of Maryland, that is going to be something important to look at. How long you've been here. The residency requirements for some state institutions are going to be 12 months to be an in-state student. Some institutions have the ability to appeal that. But now that you are here, I mean, you're going to file the FAFSA. Those Maryland State institutions, you should be eligible for the Maryland State programs as well, as long as you are now here in the state of Maryland. Let's see. All right, so it's a couple of the great questions that came in. This idea of what else, and so the questions about loss of income, change of circumstance. One of the things that we can now include within the special circumstances process is, if you are paying multiple tuitions, so they've taken the question out to simplify the formula of how many dependents do you have in college. We can now use that information within the special circumstances process to make some adjustments to the SAI calculation on your behalf for those other tuitions that you will be paying. And so there is a way to account for it kind of on the back end, but within the special circumstances process, anything that's there that can't be documented initially within the FAFSA, we can collect actual hard documents from students and families to take into account these circumstances where, again, something has changed, something is different. So the question that popped in about being employed in 22, no longer employed now. Of course, we're using 2022 tax information. That income and tax information is going to look very different from what your reality is now. And so we have this process to be able to take that into account and can use any 12-month period. And so if we have, again, and not to pry too much, but we will ask for that documentation to prove this is in fact the case, because when an audit happens, they're going to look at, so why did you make this change through this process? What documentation do you have to back it up? And we can bring this out and prove that, these are the changes and this is why we made it. But every college university is now required to accept special circumstance appeals. They're not required to approve them, but they are required to have a process in place to accept these appeals. And this can be, again, anything that's out there in terms of employment, family circumstance, really being able to look at this process to really open up availability of aid for all students based off anything that may have occurred that's expected, unexpected, but certainly opening up those programs for the students is the goal behind all of this. We've talked a little bit about those packages. They should include everything that we know you're eligible to receive at that point in time. We make an assumption based off of the state grants. A lot of colleges don't do that, but we know that if a student has an EFC, what will be an SAI at a certain level, we know they're going to be eligible for the particular program. And so we add that in there for those students to have all the information they possibly can and making those decisions moving forward to be sure that you are making the right decision for you. Different application deadlines, different notices for financial aid packages. I mentioned, College Park does a mass release in March. We get them out as soon as we possibly can to those students, again, to have all the information to make that decision, because we know that finances are a huge part of the process. SMCM stands for St. Mary's College of Maryland. The ability for students to go out and get some information, the financial student aid estimator is available now. It'll give you an idea of what your SAI looks like, what your financial need will look like. The net price calculator is something that is required by all colleges, universities that accept the FAFSA form or federal dollars for aid, to give you a good idea of what it's going to cost, at least for that 1 year moving forward. And so these are things and tools that every college university has and that you can use through the Department of Education to hopefully make all these bits and pieces make sense moving forward. And really kind of the last thing that I'm gonna talk about, and we'll get to a couple more questions that I see have come in, but is really understanding how it all fits together. It's this idea of cost and net cost, and the value sentiment that comes along with making these decisions. And the reality is, hammering home this idea of net cost, the price tag that you see minus the scholarships and grant, that gift aid that you receive, gives you your net cost. What has to be paid somehow, either out of pocket immediately, through loans, through 529s or payment plans, whatever it may be. is really important to understand, because that scholarship that is $30,000 may not have the same buying power as a scholarship of $6,000, because that cost is so much greater, that they're able to offer that $30,000 scholarship. Even though with that $30,000 scholarship, it will cost more still to attend that institution that it would be the school that gave you the $6,000 scholarship, just because it's so much more expensive. And of course, this kind of subjective piece of value. What are you getting out of the education? What's the return on your investment? Are you in a place where you're going to thrive and enjoy the educational experience? The value of an education can come down to, kind of, like I said, subjective pieces. It can also come down to some pretty concrete thinking in terms of, what's the graduation rate? Are we, one, going to graduate? Two, are you likely to graduate in 4 years or 6 years? Are you paying 2 extra years of tuition? So really having those pieces in mind as, again, you work through this process to make these decisions can be very, very helpful, and certainly answer some of those questions throughout the process as well. So with that being said, I will put my our email address in there. Let us know if you do have any questions about anything. But the ability to go through this process, get everything in on time, is going to be really, really important as you finalize applications. As soon as the FAFSA opens, I know we're all going to be, clamoring to get that out to students as quickly as we possibly can. Let's see. Oh, Title IV is the federal funding for higher education. So any school that participates in the Pell, SEOG, work study grant programs, or the federal Stafford loan programs, or any of the other federal pieces that are out there, are considered Title IV schools. So, yeah.
Rob, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and your expertise. I'm sure there are going to be more questions.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I just muted myself. I have recorded this event, so if you joined late, if you're at BCC High School, as soon as I get the download, I'll send it out through Naviance. If you are at another high school, I will be sending it to your college and career advisor, and you can follow up with them to get a copy of this. So thank you all very much for coming. We will be having, like I said, we will be having workshops throughout the year about this, as we learn more, and you're welcome to reach out to Rob or to me if you have any questions. So thank you so much, Rob.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording.